Hello everyone and welcome to this video tutorial in which I'm going to be running through some A-level law exam revision hints and tips for you. Exams are looming and I know a lot of you are going to be wondering what's the best way that you can prepare for law exams, so I hope you'll find this video really helpful. So my first tip for you when you're preparing for your exams is that it's so important that you get familiar with the format of your law exams, and hopefully this is something that your teacher has been preparing you for a while. You know what your exam board is and you know the ways in which that they're going to assess you. But I think it's really worthwhile just taking the time to make sure that you know precisely what you're going to be asked on which paper. If you happen to be with Educas exam board, you'll find 3 video tutorials where I go through the exact format of the 3 Educas A-level law exams. So you can watch those if you want some help specifically for that exam board. Whichever board you're with, I think it's worthwhile just making yourself a note, a poster, something like I've done here, where you just split up exactly what it is you're going to be doing on each exam. So again, this is just Educas. Exam 1 is the nature of law and the English legal system, and I've just bullet pointed what type of questions are going to be on that exam, and I've done the same for the other 2 exams, so I can really concentrate and prepare my revision to help me for all of those different types of questions. Once you're familiar with the format of the exams, you know what you're aiming for, the next step is to create a revision timetable. And it's really important that you set up your timetable way in advance of your exams, weeks ahead, so that you can map out precisely how much time you've got before the exams and work out how much time you're going to dedicate to law and to any other exams that you're taking. And alongside a revision timetable, I also recommend creating something that I call a revision organiser, and I'll show you a little example of a revision organiser I've made that I think is really helpful for you to manage your study across different topics and for you to see and feel reassured about what progress you're making with your revision. So this is an example of a law revision organiser that I've made and given to my students in the past, and they found it helpful. It's just a really simple Word document, but what you can see is I've gone through a topic list. So lawmaking, the different topics there, English legal system, the different topics. I've done it for criminal law, tort law and contract because they're the areas that I taught my students. And then I've got spaces, I've created columns where you can put a little tick each time you've revised the content. So if you've revised facts or cases, put a little tick next to that when you've done it. If you've practiced a 5-mark question, a little tick in there. A 15-mark scenario, obviously the questions are going to be different depending on which exam paper you're working on. So for criminal law, you can see I've got a space for my students to tick off. Have they practiced a 25-mark scenario? Have they practiced a 25-mark essay? Have they been revising content? And the idea is that they create lots of little ticks or tallies in these columns, and then it means you can see at a glance, have you been spending loads of time on negligence, say, but hardly any time on privity of contract? Have you done loads of little 5 markers here, but maybe you've not practiced a larger 25 marker? So if you take the time to create yourself a revision organiser, I think it's really worthwhile because it means that you're going to be targeting your revision effectively and spreading your time so that you're going to be revising all the topics that you need to equally. My next tip for you is really important if you're a law student, and I'm sure you'll have been making case cards for your cases throughout the year. If you've not made any case cards yet, I strongly urge you to make some now. It's never too late. And what I mean by a case card, if you're not sure, is just get yourself some revision cards, or you can cut up pieces of paper, that's fine. And the idea is on one side of the card you write down the case name. So this particular one is Brown, and you can include a picture or draw a little picture if you want to, because that will certainly remind you of the facts of Brown. And then on the reverse, the other side of the card, you should write down the principle from the case. And then you've got a little revision flashcard that you can test yourself with. You can go through your case cards, you can flip through them, you can put them out and match them into individual topics. And it's just a really quite an effective way of helping you to learn your case names. You can also get parents, friends to test you on the cases, to read out a case name and you try and recall the principle on the back. So that can be a really, really useful exercise to do. My next tip is to create topic summary sheets. And I'm sure you've done this before in revision for other subjects. All I mean here is that you're going to reduce your notes for each topic to the key points, the most important things that you need to remember. And I've got a couple of examples that I can show you of topic summary sheets, just to give you an idea of the sort of things you could be making. So this is one example, one idea for a summary sheet. You can see I've actually made this on PowerPoint, but all I've done is taken all of the key information that students need to know about civil process for the English legal system. I've separated it into 3 key areas, the process, tribunals and ADR, and I've just got some bullet points, some key facts that are important to remember, and that's much easier to revise from and to test yourself from. Another example I'd like to show you, which you could probably class as a summary sheet, is something that I call a knowledge organiser, and hopefully your teacher will have created or helped you create lots of these over the course of the year, so shouldn't be anything new to you. But this is an example of one I have for criminal law. So this knowledge organiser, again, really simple document on Word. I just created a table for my students, and you can see that on this one I've just got all of the topics for criminal law. You can see each topic is a different colour, and then what I've done is gone through and put spaces for students to write notes. So general rule, what's the general rule on omissions? You'd write that there. And then I've got the key cases that students should know, and they would write just the principle here. And they should do that for each topic. So it's defining key terms and then the key cases. So it's just, again, another summary sheet for an area of law. Filling this in, the act of filling it in, is good revision anyway, but it also means that once you've completed it, you've got a nice succinct set of notes, revision notes for each topic that you can use to revise from. Yet again, this is just another example of a summary sheet that I've made for students that you could easily make for yourself on Word. Again, I've gone through and got topic lists, but this time, instead of having case names and key terms down the side, I've just left a space. And you could even create one of these in Word and just type your answers in. Or you could print it off, and it's a good way of testing yourself. You could print this off and just write out everything you remember about mens rea in that section. So just really thinking about how can you summarise the information that you have, the notes that you already have. Another tip which relates to summary sheets is to use topic mind maps. So these might be something that you've used throughout your studies. Again, I'll just show you a couple of examples that I've done to give you an idea of the sorts of things you could try out. So here's an example of a mind map that I've done for lawmaking, and you can see that this topic includes judicial precedent, statutory interpretation, delegated legislation, etc. Sorry, some of the font's not very clear on this screen. I've done this obviously on the computer, but you could hand make them, that's not a problem. Whatever you prefer really, and you can just separate what's involved in that particular topic. Another example here, this one's criminal law. I've got property offences. I've written different sections of Acts of Parliament on this one. So again, it's just another way of representing information that you have, testing yourself, checking that you know what are the 2 types of voluntary manslaughter, what are the two types of involuntary manslaughter we've got over here. It's just another little revision tool that might be helpful for you. Related to mind maps, very similar really, just an idea would be to break down complicated rules into simplified images or flowcharts. You can see here I've just tried to summarise the rules of consideration into something that's a bit easier to remember. Another example, I'll show you a flowchart. So here's a little flowchart just showing how the Occupiers Liability Act 1957 works. And this is quite useful because you can put sections on there and you can use it to help you remember the steps in applying the law. So working out whether there's an occupier using Wheaton Lacon, premises, common duty of care, and the different important elements that are wrapped up in that duty of care. So if you can create little flowcharts, things like that, it can really help you to get your head around how these particular laws work. This is another example of a flowchart. This is a blank one that I've done for my students. I'm sure you've got similar from your teachers, but this would show duty of care, and the idea is the students fill in all the steps and the cases that would go in here, breach of duty and damage. And just to show you that that's what the filled in duty of care one would look like. So the way I've done my flowchart, I've got little ticks where it was reasonably foreseeable, little cross where it wasn't. Again, just another visual representation that can help you to remember the outcomes of cases without having to write the whole things out. Another tip is to make essay plans, particularly for evaluation type essays. So essays where you're being asked, for example, to evaluate the Theft Act. I'll just show you an example of an essay plan format that I would use. So here's an example of a little essay plan sheet. You could make these really easily on Word, print off a load of them and just fill them in for all the different topics that you're going to need to write essays for. So you could put the topic at the top, the example question that you could get from past papers, and then you don't have to lay it out like this, but I like to put AO1 bullet points down here. So what are the key facts and cases that I would need for assessment objective 1? Again, this is EDUCAS, it'll be different for different boards. And on EDUCAS, AO3 is evaluation. So what are the evaluative comments that you would make about that area of law? I would put them there, suggestions for reform and a conclusion. And that's just a nice way of, again, preparing for the exam for particular essays without having to write the full essay out. And my next tip is so important, but students typically don't like doing it, but you must practice past papers. It's so important. It is the best way of checking that you are going to be able to answer the questions when you get into that exam, and practicing writing to time, which is a skill in itself. You have to write an awful lot in an exam for law. So getting hold of past papers, setting a timer, practicing questions, really important. If you don't want to answer a full question, you could always look at the past papers, highlight key issues that are jumping out at you, and just double check that you at least know what areas of law you'd be talking about, what cases that they're looking for you to mention. But really do urge you to practice writing full answers to time. Next little tip is to record your notes. So record yourself reading out your notes, your revision notes, flashcards, and listen back to them. And the great thing about that is you could listen to your notes on the bus, when you're travelling places, you've got your headphones in, no one knows what you're doing. Listen to it before bed, really nice way to learn key cases and information. Another tip is to try a brain dump. Sorry, it doesn't have a very nice name, but I would just jot down a topic on the top of a blank piece of paper and write down everything you know without peeking at your notes, just to check what you remember, and then check back with your notes afterwards. And my final tip for the video today is just to put case names, Acts of Parliament on posters around your bedroom, anywhere that you're going to see them, because that can really help them get into your head. I hope that was helpful.